Barrie's Town and Gown Committee is finally taking the much awaited steps to make the committee meetings more inclusive. The late November meeting was filled with action oriented items to address increasing racism in Barrie. The committee members are selected every 4 years, so new members will not likely to join before next year's council elections. However, a few committee members, including Judy Morozuk, Jake Chevalier, and Rob Meyer, who is also a founding member of Barrie Community Media, have been echoing the need for diversity. A part of that initiative, the co-chair of Anti-Racism Task Force, Donald Carty, was invited to the last meeting. There was also participation from Barrie Police and Georgian College. Georgian College has recently hired its first Director of Equity, Diversity and Inclusion, Sula Levesque. However, she did not join the meeting. Barrie Community Media's request to talk to Georgian's Dean of International Education and Development was denied, but we are hoping to at least talk to Sula Levesque in coming weeks. City Council of Oxford in Britain passed a motion in 2019 to become an anti-racist city. Among other initiatives, it will become a sanctuary city by advocating closing of exploitative detention centers run by the UK government and honoring the commitment of welcoming 10,000 child refugees. Rob Meyer wants to recommend a similar motion to the City Council. This could make Barrie officially an anti-racist city. You can visit the link in the description below to know more about Oxford's initiative.
There's a city in the UK, Oxford, that the city council passed a motion to become an anti-racist city. And the motion is not obviously directly applicable to the city of Barrie, and it wouldn't be something that we would do without that this committee would put forward as a recommendation to council without fulsome discussion with represented groups. So it's really great that Donald, you're here, and Lauren, you're here, and also Leanne in your role at the college. It's great that there's this number of people representing different communities here to kick off this conversation. And so maybe I'll just leave it there. But I think ultimately, if we could get to a point where we can come up with a recommended motion that council could consider adopting to have Barrie become an anti-racist city, then I think that would be a really great outcome for this committee to achieve.
Donald Carty brought the committee up to speed about 5 action items that his task force will undertake to affect positive change.
The task force will bridge and promote a stronger, more positive understanding and representation of the city's racialized groups through actively working with and holding accountable police services, educational systems, health services, community groups, associations, municipal organizations, social services, business, labor, and government. The Barrie Anti-Racism Task Force will focus on the following 5 action themes to affect positive change in the city. So the first one is understanding, and this is to address and promote a stronger understanding of the needs of the city's racialized populations. 2 is messaging, to create and expand race-based programming, education, and resources to raise awareness about racism and the impacts of white privilege and dominance. 3, connecting, to raise awareness and correct the absence of a significant reflection of the city's diversity within its institutions and create safe spaces for dialogue. 4, transitioning, to challenge workplace practices, evaluate and promote changes that address the needs of the city's racialized populations. And the 5th is strengthening, to establish institutional accountability that ensures and strengthens the involvement and sense of belonging and well-being of racialized persons. So some of the activities that we were involved in, we were on a panel with the Canadian Roots Exchange panel, and we had a discussion on building respect and reciprocity about anti-racism and decolonization. We did a coffee chat at the Barrie Public Community Library through Zoom. We're working with, collaborating with the Barrie Public Library right now on a speaker series that'll start running in January. And we're also working on something called an anti-racism pledge, which is something that was sort of alluded to at the very beginning of the conversation that started right in this meeting. As far as public awareness and communication, we've done some things with the media. We're actually on the advisory council with the Barrie Advance, which is now Torstar. We are creating a web presence and social media, which is now just in progress. We've done a number of interviews and press releases concerning the mandate and the themes. We're in a video with the mayor and the police chief with an It Starts campaign video. And we've had a number of news articles in some of the local media, as well as an op-ed that was published on the star.com and also Barrie Advance and many others. And the title of that was "Feeling of Belonging is Key to Building Inclusion." Some of the other things that we've done is we've participated in the focus group where the Barrie Police wanted to review its organizational culture and systems. We created two public police services videos, which were about unconscious bias, bigotry, and stereotypes. There was a number of videos also for the RVH interns, microaggressions, social determinants of health. Also, we have a presence, the Barrie and Area Ontario Health Team, Barrie Advance Advisory, the RVH PFAC, we're 3 there, spirituality, diversity and inclusion. Also with the Simcoe Muskoka Catholic School Board, we're involved in equity thought exchange, and we collaborate. We spoke about equity, and the Simcoe Muskoka Black Community Development Council. Also, there was a presentation done for the Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging campaign at RVH on colonialism and belonging. And the Barrie Police also asked us to have a look at their Inside Out program that they wanted to introduce into the schools. We worked with the Barrie and Area Native Advisory Council on a grant application, and we support Georgian colleges. We supported Georgian colleges' application to develop and deliver activities associated with newcomer labor market orientation services in the county of Simcoe. We also come from an informed lens or representation because we are on a number of different committees or involved in work in the educational sector, health services, community groups and associations, social services, government institutions, advisory councils, and the media. We have a research project now, which the objective is to understand the experience of racialized peoples with working within healthcare, policing, municipal government, and education within Barrie, and to explore anti-racism practices within each employment sector. The sample population will be employees with a specific focus on those in leadership positions of each employment sector as determined by the Anti-Racism Task Force. And the study design will be a qualitative description using participatory action research. So there'll be interview data that will be collected through focus groups. Survey data will be calculated from focus group participants, and all data will be analyzed in partnership with the Anti-Racism Task Force. In November, or where we are right now, is at the very beginning, we made a commitment at the task force that we would transition Barrie into an anti-racist city that intentionally addresses racism in all its forms. We will develop and act on long and short-term initiatives that progressively move us forward. We acknowledge that this is just the beginning of our journey, and we'll add more specific, measurable goals as we listen and learn. The Barrie Anti-Racism Task Force will work with a seriousness to make substantive and transformative change, but remains acutely aware that racism is not a momentary issue. It is a systemic issue that demands sustained attention. So this is where we are now. We are blessed to have a group of volunteers, college students actually, that are heading this research project. And we're right now at the proposal stage. And the goal is to begin the process of onboarding additional organizations to help with research so we get as many sets of eyes and opinions on the work we are doing. And if you're interested, you can reach our research lead, Erica Campbell, at employmentresearch.barrie@gmail.com. And this is our message. The citizens of Barrie value equality, fairness, and opportunity for all, which is why we cannot tolerate racism within our community. But racism does still exist. It comes in many forms and happens in many places. It can be easy to ignore or to think it's not worth the trouble of responding, but that attitude helps make racism more acceptable. We all have a responsibility to stand against racism. We must all say no to prejudice, discrimination, and hate, together with a united voice. Racism shifts according to social and political conditions, shifting our focus from one frame to another without reflecting on reality. In the background, percolating through all these decades, if not century, has been anti-Indigenous and anti-Black racism, both pillars of a colonial settler society anchored in white privilege. Now, this privilege does not mean that your life is easier, but understanding it can make you realize why some people's lives are harder than they should be. The rise in hate crimes, the truth of residential schools, and the glaring inequities that have been exposed more so because of the pandemic has intensified public attention, prompting people and organizations to ask, how can we help make change? That is why we are also shifting our approach slightly now with the launch of a website and social media campaign that will provide tools and resources to help people and organizations learn about racism and, more importantly, stand against it by acting for positive change. So the focus will be to learn more about racism, how to respond effectively when racism occurs, how to be a good ally, and how to act for positive change.
Karki also talked about an Australian program called Racism Stops With Me. You can find more details about the program in the description below.
I mean, I'll just jump in and say, Donald, I wasn't aware of the level of work that your task force has been up to. So it's really great to hear everything that you've just explained to us, because I mean, I think that really charts out a path, and it is the direction that we all need to push the city to go towards. So really, I think for me, the question is, I mean, the task force has lots, clearly you have good composition and you've been doing great work. This committee has the unique ability to suggest policy direction to council through our reporting committee and then general committee up to council. So ultimately, is there a way, and I mean, maybe not at this time, but how can this committee help bolster your efforts? And if there is a way that we can push council in a way that the task force is not able to, then I know I fully would be willing to use this committee to help support your efforts.
There's a great program that they introduced in Australia that they did a national campaign, and it says, racism, it stops with me. And they've also had some ancillary things that are attached to that, which has that same sort of a message. I'm almost in tears right now because what you just said, Rob, was exactly what I was hoping we'd be able to do. Because in this campaign launch, the more people we get involved in, and this is the kind of campaign that we would like to run, so that we're basically talking about racism, but we're going to show people actionable steps, how to call it out, how to respond to it safely. And that's where it really has to come from. So we're kind of moving the focus a little more to the individual, but it also gives us a much, it removes a lot of fear once we get to know each other a lot better and hang out with each other and raise the awareness of the diversity and the beauty of this community. Things can shift very quickly. But this national campaign that they ran in Australia has been incredibly successful. And I've already put it out to the people that are designing our website that that's going to be our main focus, beginning with the launch of that. So I'd like to, we're waiting for, they're going to help us to come up with our own campaign slogan, which would be similar to that. And if we could get an endorsement or some sort of push forward on this, I think that'll fit quite nicely with what this, how some of this was introduced at the very beginning of this. What can we do about racism and that kind of thing? I think if we had a campaign like that, we can make stickers, buttons, things like that. It'll help us too to promote it in stores. We can make stickers. That'll also bring into consideration, instead of doing a charter, I'm looking at more in a way of gathering names where people pledge themselves to support this anti-racism campaign. And we've already figured out a way that we're going to be able to do that digitally and capture names with comments and things like that. And we can have that flash. So
Committee member Jake Chevalier once again pointed out to lack of diversity in committee and suggested outreach to intentionally recruit members from marginalized community. He recommended reaching out to Barrie Native Friendship Center, among others.
I know that our town and gown committee composition, I mean, it's not hard to see that there's not a lot of diversity within our own committee or table or group here. And I'm curious when it comes time to kind of have nominations or people apply to be on the board, what kind of and I'm not aware of this, but what kind of marketing are we doing to some of the more marginalized communities, some of the Barrie Native Friendship Center or so forth? Is there any sort of outreach that we do within that to make sure that we're reaching out to those communities so that we can hear those voices within this council? And then also, should there be some sort of training offered to folks on these kinds of committees to learn about what those microaggressions look like, what a microaffirmation is, how we can become aware of some of those unconscious bias that we might potentially have that could potentially come up in these kinds of meetings, right? And what kind of change, I guess, starting with this committee, because this is what we are, can we start to implement moving forward?
Judy Morozuk supported Chevalier's idea and pointed out that the application process was inaccessible.
On making the recruitment more intentional for committees, but also the application process, I personally found to be so inaccessible. And I don't know which committee or part of maybe it's Access Barrie could be looking at how to make that less intimidating and less focused on what privilege got you to the place where you can list on this piece of paper how you can contribute to a city committee. I think that we could really attract some neat people if we look creatively at how we're recruiting and what kind of experience we're looking for.
Councillor Ripma agreed that the application forms are not helpful and called for the complete revamp of them.
You're very right. And I think it's quite unconscious, but it's just the way that it's always been done. This committee is chosen by council, and what happens is that an ad goes in the paper or goes out on social network inviting applications once every 4 years, right after the municipal election, and then council sits around and says, oh yeah, this person would be great. This person, we need a representative from BHA, whatever. And that's how a committee gets struck. But I'm quite sure that there is no sort of conscious effort to make sure that we contact the Friendship Center or any other kind of racialized community at all. I think it's just an ad in the paper, and we know how that goes, right? It tends to be the white folk that say, "Gee, I'd be interested in that. Let's do that." Whereas others probably say, "Well, maybe I don't really belong there," and that's my suspicion. I really liked your idea, Jake, of training for all committee members. And I think that that is certainly something that the city could do next time that we appoint these committees. We do, when we have a committee start, we give them information about harassment, and we give them information about how the city functions and things like that. And certainly, a bit of training in whole question of race relations would be probably very easy to do. And secondly, would just raise that profile just a little bit and make everybody aware right off the hop. So I think I could certainly take that forward to our staff and make that recommendation for the next time.
The application process is just one of many residuals of colonization still left in Barrie. You can notice the colonizers' attitude in the International Relations Committee, Tourism Barrie Master Plan, and Barrie Heritage Committee. Donald Carty once again come to the rescue of the committee by offering his help.
Actually, Sherry, we can help you out with that. If you want to send us over a copy to the task force, we would be more than happy to take a look at that and see what we can do to try to make it more accessible.
That'd be great.
I'm a part of at least 15 different councils and communities in this community. And the reason for that is I wanted to ensure that there was a racialized voice on these committees and councils. And I'm surprised at how the lack of it on all of these councils that there is. So there's an important segment of our diverse city missing from a decision-making areas. There's a reason for that. There's this mistrust is one of the reasons, but one of the thing is too, is one of the things we discovered at the Ontario health teams is that some of the health teams are actually right now actually reimbursing expenses. A lot of the people that are missing from the table are single parents, people who have to work a number of jobs these are people that are missing, but an important part of our community. We need to try to be able to encourage the participation of every single individual, including youth, which isn't participating participating in these councils and committees, and that's the future. So a lot of the councils and committees that I'm on right now, that this is how it looks, is what you see right here. So I'm not foreign to this, but we have to look at a different way of recruiting, of bringing people in. Belonging is the big thing. It's not easy just coming in, and so even as what's the word? Well, when we look at that stuff that you've got, Sherry, I'm sure we would be able to have some things that we can help out in there to try to attract a much more diverse group into a lot of these committees and councils, and that's going to help tremendously.
It was refreshing to see that Georgian college representatives finally acknowledged the racism and discrimination faced by international students. However, there was no acknowledgement that the Canadian secondary education system itself is based on exploiting international students, many of them from poor countries and poor family backgrounds.
You turned your mind at all as to how you can connect with the community? And you said the community, and I took it that it would be the broader community, but what about the community right around Georgia? Have you ever sort of given any thought to that idea?
So we're talking about geography, right?
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, I think that is a key place to start, because that's where the bulk of our students are living, working. That's where they start to build a sense of community and belonging. And that's where we also see some of the issues like racism and discrimination bubbling up, as well as sort of the historical student versus community sort of lived here for a long time. And now there's all these students, that sort of historical conflict that's always happened. And then adding some of the additional pieces with the increased diversity in that area. I think that's a great place to start in terms of our community building, and then sort of broaden that after we build those connections within our direct community.
Hopefully, the committee will invite students to share their experiences in future. Another actionable item discussed was running a communication campaign similar to Australia's Racism Stops With Me.
Sherry, maybe this is a question for you. So looking at that, like that Australian example with the sort of the racism, it starts with me, or it stops with me, excuse me. What possibility would there be for like Access Barrie to investigate or look into doing some type of a communications campaign around a theme like that? Is that something that your department could take on its own, or is that something your department would require direction from council in order to take on?
I think we'd probably need some type of direction, because it would be great if it could be led through our anti-racism task force. And then through our corporate channels, we would amplify that messaging, would be my preference. And then through all of our channels, and we could replicate the messaging and share it, and all of our channels, we could put it in all of our corporate assets like This Week in Barrie and all of those places. But I think the right place for it to live would be with the task force, and then we support them in that initiative. Donald, I see your hand up. Are you agreeing?
Yeah, because I'm excited, because that's the way I'd like it to go. Yes.
Okay.
Hiring of bylaw officers to allegedly target student housing near Georgian College shows that Barrie City Council has given in to campaign of hate and discrimination. However, it is to be seen how receptive the Council will be to ideas of equality and reconciliation discussed by the Town and Gown Committee. That was the update from Town and Gown Committee meeting. See you next time. Goodbye.